Taberon Dave Honie, born on October 29, 1975. Taberon Honie had alcohol when he was 5 years old. He grew up in poverty and suffered multiple head injuries as a child, which might have caused him to be mentally unstable. Native American from the Hopi tribe, Honie was raised with 5 siblings in First Mesa, a village on the eastern side of the Hopi Reservation in northern Arizona, and is considered Hopi too. His childhood was marked by neglect, violence and chaos. Life on the mesa was extremely difficult, as the family of 8 survived without access to basic resources like running water or toilets for nearly a decade. Honie and his siblings often were left to fend for themselves, with the older children starting fires to cook or warm the house since Honie's parents were always absent, drinking and fighting. Honie began to act out at the age of 10, turning to alcohol and drugs after falling in with the wrong people, and later stealing things to obtain booze and drugs. His substance abuse problems continued into adulthood until his arrest. Honie has also grappled with bouts of depression, getting a formal diagnosis in 2009 following various suicide attempts. Honie's traumatic childhood, brain damage, long-standing substance abuse and extreme intoxication all had a synergistic effect, impacting his ability to control his judgment and behavior. On July 9, 1998, Honie also inherited generations of trauma from his parents, extended family, and his Hopi Tua community, which is referred to as intergenerational trauma. On July 9, 1998, Honie was drunk and fighting over the phone with girlfriend Carol Pichiavit, who was staying at her mother's house along with the daughter she shared with Honie. At one point Honie threatened to kill everyone in her home and take the couple's daughter if Pichiavit didn't make time to see him. Not taking the threat seriously, Pichiavit left the home and headed to work. Honie headed to the house, saying he had planned to sleep under the porch until Pichiavit came home. But as soon as he arrived, he began arguing with Pichiavit's mother, Claudia Ben, who was babysitting her 3 granddaughters. Honie told police that Ben started the argument and was calling him names through a sliding glass door before he snapped, broke through the door and went inside, saying he just wanted to scare Ben. Ben had grabbed a butcher knife but was overpowered by Honie, who grabbed the knife and brought it to her throat. Honie says the two of them both tripped while the knife was at Ben's throat and that she fell on the blade. When police arrived shortly after, Honie, covered in blood, emerged from the home and said he had stabbed and killed her with a knife, court documents say. Ben was found face down in the living room, with numerous stabbing and cutting wounds to her neck and genitals. All 3 grandchildren were found at the home with varying degrees of blood on their clothes and body. There was also evidence that one of Ben's granddaughters was sexually abused at some point. Honie was arrested, charged and convicted of aggravated murder, and sentenced to death. After decades of failed appeals, Honie's execution warrant was signed in June despite defense objections to the planned lethal drug. In July, the state changed its execution protocol to using only a high dose of pentobarbital, the nervous system suppressant used to euthanize pets. The Utah Board of Pardons and Parole denied Honie's petition to commute his sentence to life in prison after a July hearing, during which Honie's attorneys described his troubled childhood growing up on the reservation with parents who abused alcohol. He had started using hard drugs as a teenager and told the parole board he wouldn't have killed Ben if he had been in his right mind. He asked the board to allow him to exist so he could be a support for his daughter. On August 8, 2024, after 25 years on death row, Taberon Dave Honie was executed. Taberon Dave Honie, 48, was convicted of aggravated murder in the July 1998 death of Claudia Ben. Honie was pronounced dead at 12:25 a.m. Mountain Time in an execution that went as planned and took about 17 minutes. He tapped his foot and mouthed "I love you" to family members watching from a witness chamber after he was given the lethal injection of 2 doses of pentobarbital. Strapped to the execution table in a sterile white room at the state prison, Honie turned his head to thank correctional officers for taking care of his family before he lost consciousness. When the curtain was pulled back in the execution room, Honie was looking up, had an IV in both arms, which were strapped down to a table, said media witness Ben Winslow. Honie let out a gasp as the drug flowed through IVs in both arms, and his torso jolted off the table. He then laid still for several minutes before he died, turning a pale shade of blue as his glasses slid back on his forehead. Before Honie gave his final words, the warden read the death warrant to him. Honie looked around the room and began tapping his foot. The witnesses said they weren't sure it was out of nervousness or just a reaction to what was happening. He mouthed something to the warden and the director of operations, but witnesses could not hear what he said, and then he lifted his head again and took in a deep exhaling breath and opened his mouth wide. His breathing then began to accelerate before slowing down. His skin then turned pale and blue, then shortly after, he was pronounced dead. His final words were, "From the start it's been, if it needs to be done for them to heal, let's do this. If they tell you you can't change, don't listen to them. To all my brothers and sisters in here, continue to change. I love you all. Take care." Honie was 22 when he broke into Ben's house in Cedar City, the tribal headquarters of the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah, after a day of heavy drinking and drug use. He repeatedly slashed Ben's throat and stabbed other parts of her body. The judge who sentenced him to death also found that Honie had sexually abused one of Ben's other grandchildren, who was in the house with a then 2-year-old Tressa at the time of the murder. Honie, who had grown up on the Hopi Indian Reservation in Arizona, spent the evening with his daughter and other immediate family before the execution. He told his daughter Tressa earlier this week that he had come to terms with his fate and hoped she could too. His last meal was a cheeseburger, French fries and a milkshake. After the medical team removed Honie's body from the chamber, his family was allowed in to perform a Native American grieving ritual with bird feathers and cornmeal that they told officers would help free his soul after death. Honie's execution was the first execution to take place in Utah since that of Ronnie Lee Gardner, who died by firing squad in 2010. Outside the prison, a group of anti-death penalty protesters sang Amazing Grace and held signs that said, "Oh, life is precious." Honie always accepted responsibility for his crimes and expressed deep remorse for his actions, which were committed while he was extremely intoxicated from drugs and alcohol. Over the past 25 years, Mr. Honie worked on himself to become a better person. Thank you for watching Death Row.